Artlist.io. Music licensing reimagined. Artlist.io. Music licensing reimagined. Artlist.io. Music licensing reimagined.
Good evening and Merry Christmas, everyone. Welcome to Hannah Klein's Time. How are you going to spend your Christmas this year? Before starting Hannah's podcast today, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to Hannah's Substack on https://hannahkleinstories.substack.com. Hannah needs some support from you and kind donation from her webpage, https://officialhannahklein.com, would be appreciated.
Good evening. This is Hannah Klein. Well, I don't know what to say when I think of the mass shooting that happened on the 14th of December. It happened in Australia when there were approximately 2,000 people present at the beach. You know what? It's not about somebody else's problem, and it's not just that. I first of all, I have to say that I pay sincere condolences to the victims of the Bondi Beach massacre, and I just do not have words. I talked with some people over this, including the guest of today, but today's guest. But I have to say that this affected a lot. I guess not just it affected not just the Jewish people, but I do not believe that this should be allowed. I mean, the terrorists should never be thinking that this is tolerable in other countries. And once they commit this kind of crime, it's a kind of gift that they do. And this should never be happening. I wrote about, in the notice, I wrote about Dr. Pearl Daniel Pearl's father, Daniel Pearl was a Wall Street journalist, and I actually knew about the time when the terrorist killed him. He was basically executed, but I just do not have words on what to say about how the media has been reporting in Japan. It sounds like because of the war, this kind of violence is happening. Is that their logic? I mean, why do they think that it's okay? I mean, the Japanese media, on the 24th, Kyodo Tsushin, they talk about, for example, Israeli soldier slightly injured in Gaza. What is the point of making this a title in the first place? They, this is like, what Hamas wants people to say, obviously. They say Israeli military announced on the 24th that an explosive device exploded on a vehicle during operations in Rafah. And it goes on. And, IDF claims that there was a violation of ceasefire. But why do they think it's okay for Hamas to violate ceasefire in the first place? This should not be taking place. And when it comes to violating ceasefire, then IDF is blamed for their commitment not, kind of what? They as if they framed Hamas to do that. I mean, what kind of responsibilities do adults have? I mean, these people, okay, the shooter, they were father and a son. It's unbelievable. And it was densely populated at the time of the shooting, and I just do not understand why this kind of mass shooting happened in the first place. And in Australia, my guest today was talking about how much the glorification of Hamas is allowed, not stopped by the administration. Even though it's free, there is free speech. It's not about what they want to say. Like, if they say free speech is what they want to say, then it is not free speech, because obviously the free speech killed 15 people, I think. I think those hate speeches is one of hate speeches are one of the reasons why this kind of mass shooting happens. And I just pray and hope that there is no such mass shooting in Japan. I don't want to talk about the possibilities, but there is, I cannot say zero possibility, because, Australia has very strict gun law, and, Japan doesn't allow people to possess gun, basically, and the mass shooting. Um, um, well, it's well, we talked about various topics, but basically, I think it's wrong to discern, like make the difference between Israel and the Jewish people according to the definition of outsiders. And, it sounds like a discrimination in a sense, because that's how one kind of a thing that Nazis started is basically classifying people. And this is much of a big warning for the Jewish people, I think. And from the river to the sea, for example, there is Israel. And from the river to the sea, when they chant with those crowds that proudly support Hamas, they mean that it's about just exterminating Israel. And they have tried to do it for a long time. And that's what Sagi, today's guest, was saying. They are not joking at all. And it's a really, really serious warning for people who are aware of what IS is. And I don't know why, but those Japanese journalists who learn about IS, well, I don't know what kind of classification they want to do, but they seem to be thinking that it's a kind of a sect that understands the religion in a different sense. Well, I think that religious extremism should not be allowed, should not be tolerated, especially when it comes to murdering people. I was looking at my social media, timeline. It's not funny. For example, Congressman Richie Torres, he has been exposed to anti-Semitism, not just anti-Semitism, but he has been facing death threats, horrible, he's exposed to hate speeches, and I heard one of the hate speeches, and it's very scary, and I think that there may be some people who want to target him for no reason. I mean, he was even targeted because he doesn't support Ukrainian children. I mean, who are murdering Ukrainian children? Who are kidnapping Ukrainian children? Russia is. Okay. I mean, when it comes to Russia, it's no joke for Japan, especially, because they are the neighboring country, and they are doing all these horrible things against their neighbors. I mean, and you know what? Now, Putin finds it some convenience in using North Korea, but I don't think that Russia will move or make a decision for the sake of North Korea, because they have never done it in history that way. And they will never do that. I'm talking about Putin too. But I mean, what Sagi said about well, if you listen to our conversation, you will understand indeed. But it's not about complaining, but it's a warning sign for the Jewish people, especially the Bondi massacre. That was horrible. And I think it's wrong to discern between Israeli people and the Jewish people. There is actually no reason to do that. Who likes to do it? Those radicals. And I hope people will understand it.
Bondi was shocking and harsh, but kind of expected. The climate was hostile towards the Jewish community. I'll talk in a second about what I've seen since, which is, I'll be honest, not much difference. And Australia, generally speaking, hasn't really tackled any of the extremists that it's had. When there was plans to take down an Etihad flight from Sydney to Abu Dhabi, it was actually delivered to ASIO, the security agency for Australia, by the Israeli intelligence, because they intercepted calls between operators in the Middle East and the terrorists in Sydney, because they had a problem with the first time that they tried to take down their plane. The bomb that they made was too heavy and they had to come back home and manufacture it a little bit lighter. So that sort of emphasized how incompetent they are for many different reasons. Not that we haven't got good people in the security establishment, it's that they are restricted by government policy and budget constraint, etc. The information that popped about the two shooters, the two terrorists that did the massacre, they went for training in the Philippines. They were monitored in the past, but weren't really taken seriously.
There are Al Qaeda there, right?
Yeah. They've had the ISIS flag in their car. And I think that sort of emphasized, it's not that it was a government decision to overlook the anti-Semitism when it comes to the terrorists. It's a scarier thing. It's that they don't have the foresight that the Islamic radical terrorism in Australia is a risk. And there's non-terror cells, and you've got areas around Australia where there's open endorsement and condoning of those particular terror groups, and they're allowed to operate freely. Even when the Australian government is being highlighted that there's an issue with a particular group, to sort of go around. And I've posted in the last week a video of the Deputy Prime Minister and the Defence Minister, and he's asked by the journalist, will you tackle the Islamic hate speech from the western part of Sydney? And he just wouldn't answer. He was talking about the Nazi salute, and he was stuttering and basically just delivered the word salad that didn't make any sense, but he was avoiding the huge elephant in the room, which is we've got a radical Islamic problem. It's been visible. They're happy to say it out loud because there's no repercussion in Australia. And you can see that after, well, as the first shot were fired in Bondi, you've, in an eerie resemblance to October 7, you've had people posting online either messages of support or threats that and warnings that this will be weaponized by the Zionist community to suppress any discussion in Palestine. It was instantaneous, almost as if they knew it's going to happen. You had conspiracy theories that the Jews were behind it, that this is a Mossad false flag that's got nothing to do with Jews. And it was an onslaught that happened instantaneously and continued by some cases people that would be perceived as media personalities, people who would go who are public figures, people from all the independent journalism industry that were pushing those either libels or misinformation, or in some cases blunted racism, because they feel that they can do it. Some online accounts that were targeting Chabad in Sydney before Hanukkah and calling for people to target them because of their links to Israel are still online and continuing with the anti-Zionism propaganda. So that hasn't stopped, hasn't really slowed down. Government in Australia is focusing on gun laws because it's an easy deflection, ignoring the fact that also there were IED explosive in the vehicles, but refusing once more to address the source of the problem. So they're dealing with the symptoms, but they're not dealing with the source of the problem due to incompetence, ideology, voter base, and in some cases, and I think it's also an Australian thing, it's just the hope that if we will ignore it, eventually it will go away and we don't have to deal with it, or someone else will deal with it. So it's a kick in the can down the road, hoping that someone will deal with that eventually, not them. The
You know, like I invited Dr. Omer on my podcast because you know he was saying a lot of interesting things about the Middle East, you know,
yeah,
and radical Islam, you know, and you know he was talking about ISIS, of course. And you know, one thing I realized was that you know, ISIS is not the principalists, you know, those who live in principle and try to live in peace, but they are rather abusing the religion and
mhm,
they're, you know, abusing, they're radicalized people.
yeah,
And um, the Japanese, for example, Middle Eastern, you know, those who are involved in the Middle Eastern studies, they almost never mention that. And you know, they call it academic neutrality.
mhm.
You know, it's not
It's
neutral, you know.
it's well interesting, and be amazing to find someone to actually research it. But it seems like a lot of Westerners country, they've got a troubled history, that you know, Japan with World War II or some of their ex-empires, etc. They seem to be holding this opinion where there's almost a justification for certain radicals from around the world as a form of we've done some harm in the past and we need to correct that harm, kind of a bit of like a guilt trip. And now we have to understand the context of how they operate. When you're looking at so the radical Islam, it's not that it's different Islam. I don't know, and once again, I'm not a scholar in it. I'm looking at it from my own perspective, family history, being born in the Middle East. Look, at the end of the religion, a lot of religions are very fundamentalists in their core, but a lot of religions have gone through an enlightenment stage where people kept them as a tradition rather than a belief system. So I say a lot about myself. I'm not a religious Jew. I'm a Jew. I like the tradition. I adhere to Shabbat dinner and the holidays, and I raise my kids Jewish, and I love the history,
Mm.
but I don't believe in it. Like my kids, I've got two young daughters, and they ask me questions, and I've been very blunt and honest. I don't believe in it, but I love the tradition, I love the history. I love that when we go to Israel, I can take them to places where it's out of the Bible, or places there, you know, not even in the Bible or any of the books, but just something that's 1,500 years ago, and it's got a Hebrew inscription on it, and we can read it, and it's part of our history, and this it's a core in a lot of humans. It's the tribalism. We want to belong to something, and I'm lucky enough to do it and to belong to something and enjoy that history. And with a lot of the Muslims, there's a lot of Muslims that are carrying that on as a tradition. There's a lot of beauty in it.
Mm.
But then there's a lot of people who are still adhering to the core of the religion, which was written hundreds and hundreds of years ago, you know, in tougher times. And in those tougher times, there were different rules and different traditions and different way that you handle things. And I think that a lot of people in the Western world, modern world, I call it, not just the Western world, the modern world, we're born into a world that's only been around for a few decades, but we assume that it's been around for much longer. The radical Islam is basically a leftover from the past that's refusing to go away. Um, and you can see it in other places as well. Now, Christianity separated from the radical bit, and at the end of the medievals, they started to go through the Enlightenment separation of church and state, and it became kind of like, and I know I'm generalizing, a lot of people are still very strong believers in it, but it became like the royal family in a lot of countries.
Mm,
UK, it's a relic of the past, the UK, but it's not the be all and end all. No one looking at the kings or the emperors or whatever as the rulers anymore. But they
mm,
represent a certain of traditions that you want to keep. And I think with a lot of modern religions, that's what happened.
mm,
Kind of keeping the good part and the bad part we've buried in the past.
mm,
With the radical Islam, it's a leftover of the past.
mm,
Unfortunately, it's very lucrative to a lot of people because it provides um, cover for atrocities. I mean, I'm looking. I'm a man. I've got two young daughters. I've got a wife. I'm surrounded by women, and we're living in the West, which is amazing. And it's always like at the back of my mind that the radical Islam and that sort of radical world is a place where they don't have equal rights. Now, we were born into a world where most of the world, where women are equal, more or less, maybe some discrimination and some issues, etc., etc. But overall, equal. They can vote, they can work, they can go out. My wife's got a PhD. That's something that would have been unheard of more than 100 years ago in most places around the world. Now we look at it as normality. In the Middle East, in some of the radical places, men can have multiple wives. A lot of men will find it is an attractive idea.
mm,
The women are basically a property rather than an individual. And it's hard to say to people, well, you have to give up your slaves. And an ideology that a lot of people will find very lucrative.
mm.
Then another thing is that it's a. Can I just take that one? I
Sure.
just say, um, so getting back to it, it's another thing is it's a missionary ideology. So it's a political ideology and it's a missionary one that's set to convert people. A lot of people in across the world have lost sense of belonging, and it feels like under the radical Islamic path, they're getting it. They're giving them an ability to belong to something. Now, I know, Japanese people are very
No, I think that last time I talked about Aum Shinrikyo's terror
yeah,
attack.
mhm,
It's a form, it's an abuse. He was a religious
mhm,
uh leader
yep,
with, cult leader,
mhm,
but there were a lot of people who were trapped in it,
mhm,
and there are still some groups operating in Japan, and uh, I think that Japanese people might think radical Islam is about, the Middle East, but it's actually not that irrelevant to people. Like, we have had a terrorist attack operating in Lebanon. She was released last year. Yeah, Husako Shigenobu, the
mhm,
Red Army's leader.
yep,
And uh, you know, I she talks about peace. She talks about the rights of the people. You know, she was the one who took away the rights of the people, the lives of the people.
yeah.
And she
I
justifies herself very much, and she talks about it. She tells how right she was, And the strangest part is that the media allows her to talk about it. And it's weird. Like,
It's
looking at like it's like looking at like the radical Islamists, talking, how right they are. Like,
but it's like that. There's a weird alliance between, and it's actually been through a lot of the revolutions. The radical progressive left has teamed up with revolutionaries around the world and around history, from the Bolshevik to the Iranian to Che Guevara and Fidel Castro. They go with the radicals, and the radicals know how to abuse the that sort of radical progressive left way of looking at things. So they 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 know how to talk the language, they know how to operate them, and they're the first one to go. Once the revolution succeed, it happened in Iran, it happened with the Bolsheviks, it happened in Cuba, it happened in basically everywhere that it metastasized into a successful revolution. The first people that were eliminated were the left elite that fought with them. And you can see it in the West, and you can see it in Japan, and you can see it in a lot of other people. And media for me is basically the representative of that sort of like left elite. They ignore, and funny enough, I talk about it from an Australian context. Despite the terrorists having an ISIS flag, despite the terrorists having known connection to Islamic radical groups, one of the leading political analysts in ABC, on a podcast, gave that her opinion, there's no link between religion and so wait. So going back to that, and he was I was talking about ABC. For an ABC leading political person, journalist, to call that the massacre in Bondi has got nothing to do with religion is basically, it's ludicrous. But there's something malicious and nefarious in it. She knows that it is, but she chooses to distance Islam from it. And you could see it with the coverage. The amazing guy that they jumped in and fought with one of the terrorists, Ahmed El Ahmed, Muslim from Syria, absolutely incredible. But almost no report on the Israeli that did it as well. Geffen was in intensive care, in critical condition since then.
yeah, the rabbi, right?
Or the rabbi, or the elderly Russian Jewish couple that fought and got shot before probably the first two victims. And there was very little mention of the background of the two terrorists for quite a while in certain media outlets. And it shows how sick some of the media is, because this is not only a problem for the Jews that got massacred, or for us. I see it as it's the beginning of a very risky fall into the abyss of bigotry and racism, because all they do is they making the problem bigger and worse. And what do I mean with that? I mean, you look at the last 2 years, the government here has been avoiding the subject, hoping they will go away. It's been telling Jews that it's to do with Israel, free speech is important. And now you had a massacre on Bondi. Now, for a lot of Australians, if it was 50 Jews killed in the synagogue, it would have been quiet. They don't talk politics. They like to say, well, it's someone else's problem, not my problem, and move away. But the fact that massacre happened on the most iconic beach in Australia, one of the most iconic beaches in the world, Bondi, has woken up a lot of Australians, but not in a good part. And I've seen comments on some of my posts where people call for deportation of all Muslims. And when I start talking with that particular person, very quickly it became deport non-Christians. And that's the problem. It basically nurtures a hostile environment that's hostile towards everyone. And it will break the society down from within. It will create division. There'll be more segregation. There'll be more us and them. And I said, I was absolutely appalled when he even mentioned the Muslim. I said, I can't support that. Oh, but you don't know, we need to tackle radical. Say, yeah, tackle radical Islam is important. Isolating Muslims and kick them out is not a solution. There's no problem. It doesn't matter how big the radical pool is with the Muslim. I shouldn't taint the entire Muslim world with the same things. Most of them are peaceful and loving people. There is a problem with Islam. They need to address it as well. I'm not clearing them of the responsibility, but the last thing I want to do, and that's what I said to him, like, I'm coming from the Middle East. I'm comfortable with Middle Eastern people. I'm more comfortable with Middle Eastern people. When I say comfortable, I feel at home around Middle Eastern people because that's where I'm from. Whether they're Muslims, whether they're Druze, whether they're Baha'i, whether they're Assyrians, Maronite, Christian, Copt, it doesn't matter. We're sharing a culture around tradition, music, our behavior, food. There's a lot of things that are shared between us and them. Now, the fact that most of that neighborhood doesn't like me, it doesn't matter. There's enough people that do. And for me, I'm keen on hoping that eventually it will change because I can't eliminate them. And I don't wish on people to be eliminated. I just wish on people to be with us. And when you look at, for instance, the hypocrisy of the West, it's actually amplified, not with us, because there's been terror attacks on the Jews for so long, and everything has been almost normalized in a way. It just, you crap, Manchester and Yom Kippur, the world was in shock. 2 minutes later, they forgot about it and moved on. And there were plenty of instances like that. There's things like, Druze in Syria, they were massacred and silenced. Worse, some people were justifying it because they were enemies by proxy by being connected to Israel, or because Israel came to assist them, obviously the Druze must be bad. Or they're drinking the same Kool-Aid that the Sunni radicals in Syria are feeding them about the Druze, which you can replace the Druze with Jews, and it's exactly the same. And for me, to see Israeli flags in Sweden or in some outer skirts of Damascus is something outside. It was a sci-fi, probably a year ago. You wouldn't have thought of something that ever happened. This is countries where people disappeared for decades for receiving a call from Israel. And all of a sudden, you've got pictures of Bibi Netanyahu on their cars together with their spiritual leader for the Druze community in Syria. And it's and I know once again that there's a special bond between the Druze in Israel and the Jews in Israel. And it's warming to see it also with the Alawites. They see Israel as a savior. You see the Kurds, and there's an uprising now between the Kurds and the Syrian army, and you see the Druze. And it's basically an awakening of a lot of the minority groups in the Middle East that giving me a little bit more hope than the West, because they started discovering their voice. It's kind of like, I think, if something good will come out of all of it, is that you've got voices in the eastern part of the Mediterranean, and it even extends to the likes of Cyprus and Greece, where they're starting to group together against the forces of evil. And I'm going to call them the forces of evil because they are. It's funny enough, the new empires that want to colonize areas. It's some of the old empires that want to become new one, like Turkey, and it's voices they were silenced for millennia, some of them, and some of them for centuries. That's starting to lift their heads up, group together, and hopefully they will start driving the change that will eventually penetrate the West. The West is, people been saying Jews are the canary in the coal mine, and a lot of people hearing it, and I think it just goes over their head. we are targeted now disproportionately, but all those that target us have got the same issue with the West. So and what do I mean with that? And you know, I link it to Japan.
Mm.
And once again, I'm looking at it from the outside, but the narrative on Japan versus China in the same circles that are anti-Jew are very much pro-China. And
Exactly. That's what, yeah. But
and
you
it
know, I was already seeing it because of October 7th and the narrative of the Chinese government. You know, they say something like, you know, oh, the Palestinian people are suffering, but you know, they make their neighbors suffer, including Japan.
yes, and that's the and I think there's been, and I don't know if there'll be any structural change. When you look at diplomacy, I think a lot of countries team together, even though they weren't. When you look at China, China is perceived to be an adversary for quite a lot of the Asian continent and you know South Asia, and they've got disputes with the Philippines and with Vietnam and with Japan and with Taiwan, and they've been a very aggressive player, but at the same time, they've enjoyed a trading relationship and a diplomatic relationship with the same countries that are basically constantly fighting the Chinese expansion. And semantics is important, and I've seen it in Australia. There was a very big focus, for instance, on the South China Sea, and the fact that it's called the South China Sea, and the fact that it's when it's reported they're minimizing China's expansion. So there's very little really reports about some of the artificial islands that they're creating to extend the maritime borders and the maritime waters, economic waters they can actually operating with. There's been quite an aggressive in the way that they conduct, for instance, training exercises in Australian waters without asking for permission.
Oh yeah.
And I look at it, I guess the privilege of living life, most of my life in a war zone, is when someone's signaling to you that they're coming after you, believe them. And China's not shy of expressing what their plans are. Yet a lot of people in the West excuse that. And I remember having discussions with friends and colleagues in the past, and it was around COVID time. And they were more indoctrinated in the way that they were looking things. And they were telling basically what it's China's time now. You know, China's been under the thumb of the West for so long now. It's the, oh, sorry, no one's time now. There's no one that's got a right to do anything. And China wasn't under the thumb of anyone. China has been around for a very long time in one way or another with different areas in another. Yeah, it lost some grounds, it gained some grounds, it was up, it was down, etc. But it was never under the thumb of anyone, and it shouldn't have its time now. It basically should be looked like any other country, and if it gets out of line, then it needs to be addressed. And when you look at the and funny enough, it's very similar when you look across the world. So if you've got drill between Japan and Taiwan, China will immediately go out and call out their aggressions. Where in even primary school kids should be able to look at let's say military powers and economic powers and to say that Taiwan and Japan by themselves impose any threats on China is ludicrous. China is enormous. It's got huge economy, lots of reserves. It's built an enormous army, almost self-sufficient, and it expresses aggressions in regards to what it wants. It's got very much an imperial vision. You've got a similar, and it's the same with Russia, talking about Ukraine. With all the respect, even if Ukraine joined NATO, it never imposed the risk on Putin. Putin abuses that because that's easy for him. He can play the victim, and idiots in the West, useful idiots, will fall into it and justify things they're doing with China. You look at Turkey. Turkey's got an imperial ambitions. It occupies northern parts of Syria. It meddles in so many different parts of the Middle East. It's been threatening the EU. If it doesn't get stuff, it will do, push more refugees into it and fund a lot of radicals around. It occupies northern parts of Cyprus. And now that you've got a summit between Cyprus, Greece, and Israel, Turkey's talking about as if it's aggression. It's like the three of them are teaming up to be the aggressor, even though Turkey's been the aggressor. Turkey is calling for the elimination of Israel, but when Israel's teaming up with Greece and Cyprus, which Turkey threatened as well, Turkey then cries victim and say, "Oh, poor us. We now, getting threatened by that particular." And you can see it with the same, people like to call the axis of evil. What's the new axis of evil? You look at China, you look at Russia, you look at Turkey, you look at Qatar. They all play victims because for the West, and that's what they understood. The West has got ingrained into us the DEI ideology of whoever the victim, whoever the underdog is, we need to appease and help and assist and prioritize. But the irony is that I would never call someone, not Turkey, not China or Russia, underdogs in any way, shape, or forms. They used to be empires. Some of their time is gone, but they're still large economies, huge armies, huge amount of population. They're pretty much safe from any outside interference by different types of reasons. And yet they play victim, and the useful idiots in the Western world fall for it and protect them. It's literally when you compare all of those particular things and you look at the same voices that will excuse, appease, and justify radical Islam, they'll do it with Russia, they'll do it with China, they'll do it with Iran, they'll do it with Qatar, they'll do it with Turkey, they'll do it with all of them. They know how to play the right music for the useful idiots to follow them like the Pied Piper. Yeah.
Iran, tries to pretend to play victims. They again here they appear on the media shows talking about how peaceful Islam is. Like, look at what they are. They kill their own people. They execute their own people. And then, the government, this he's not charismatic at all. He's a cruel dictator. And, just because he's, called a religious leader, that should never be justified in the first place.
It shouldn't. And that's the frustrating element, I think. It's how they use the tolerance that we've got in the West, where everyone is free to practice their own religion. That there's parts in Judaism I don't like. Okay, it's not really practice, but in some of the ultra-Orthodox, women don't have the same opportunities as men, and it's frowned upon, and I'm happy to call it out. I'm also happy to call some of the bigotry that's coming from certain ultra-Orthodox groups, etc., that don't represent us. Do they feed off traditional Judaism? Yes, but it's their way of interpreting it, and they're cult-like in the way that they operate. And I think that one of the nice things is that I've got the ability to stand up and actually say it, and I won't be hunted down for it, and that'd be good. When you look at the Islamic world, and that's, I think, a mistake that a lot of them are making for various reasons. Like I know of a new organization that looks to improve social cohesion in Australia. and they're getting a lot of minority groups and Australians to team up together, etc. And they're struggling to get a Muslim person to speak on the podcasts. And they
Really?
go,
Yeah,
because
I think I have heard of the group, yeah, but I
yeah,
don't
they're
exactly know
scared.
about it.
Yeah, and I they see they're scared. Now I can understand them, but
Mm.
I think that it's once you become a parent and you've got kids, I think you look at things in a different perspective. So I've sent my two daughters to Jewish camp today, and I did not like the fact that I was looking around because where we dropped them off is a very well-known Jewish youth movement area. You can find it on Google. Yes, we've had more security than we've had before. There were armed security patrol going around, but someone with similar weapons to what they used in Bondi would have taken quite a few of us down before that. So I feel the need to speak up because although my daughters are affected with it, I want to try and make it better for them as much as I can moving forward. I'm not too worried about it, but anyone that speaks up, putting a target on their back. Um, I think a lot of people in the Muslim community need to start um, getting the courage to speak up because what they're doing is they're damaging the chance of their once again, as I said, the majority of the Muslim population globally, they're non-practicing, so they practice the tradition, not the religion, and they do it because of a choice. But what they don't understand is by being silent, they are basically uh, signing the future of the offsprings into lives under radicals. Because the more quiet they are, the louder the radicals are, and the percentage or the ratio of radicals to non-radicals will change towards the radicals. So there's a saying in Hebrew that came from the Bible, um, Avot achlu boser shine banim tikena, and it's basically the kids will pay for the sins of the fathers, basically. So if we're not going to take the actions, the people who actually pay for that will be our kids and the grandkids, etc. And history repeated itself. We've got a lot of societies where people became too comfortable in their lives and decided not to speak up. And eventually, their offsprings are the one that had to pay for it. So,
But I think that I have to go in a few minutes, but I really think that the radical Islam,
yeah.
is a potential, like a bomb, you know, for even for Japan. And I think that Australian government has a lot of has allowed of course a lot of like refugees, but I have, especially after the so, uh, um, even I think that there isn't like a, yeah, publicly, and I guess famous researcher with PhD who used to be operating as an ISIS in Syria.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think that there are a lot of radical Islamists being nurtured in the West. And uh it's very scary, like um like I think that it's a calling sign even for Japan to it was I have to say, because Prime Minister Takaichi, I think she has a very different position on I guess like not about this, I think, terrorist attacks, and at the same time I have to say that it's about, immigration issues that
Yeah,
Japan, likely potentially have. And so, it's, um, you know, and, what I saw at Bondi Beach, there could be Japanese there, you know.
yeah,
Australia has the second largest population, among the Japanese, like a foreign, expatriates living in various countries. The first is of course the United States, but the second is Australia because of the geography and also the language availability. And I there could have been the those who were affected by the terror attack,
yeah.
and for that reason, the Japanese, I think that uh, government systematically needs intelligence service, more, in detail. And I think that it has to cooperate very well with actually Australian government and also other, governments that holds intelligence information, about the terrorist attacks.
Yeah.
I mean, and also the terrorist groups, right? So,
Mhm.
you know, I really think that it's supposed to be a calling, I think that it should be an alarming call for many Japanese, but there has so far I don't watch almost any Japanese news covering, who the victims were and why they were targeted. And I think that, in a way, it should be told, why.
It's the canonic comment. It's the beginning. And if the longest that let's say like the Japanese media or Australian media or other places will continue to ignore it, it's
Mm,
only going to intensify. I mean, since October, sorry, since September 11th, I think it's something like 70,000 Islamic terrorist attack around the world. Like the number is
yeah,
staggering. There's a
yeah.
number that's reported around, and I don't know the exact number, but it's between 60 and 70,000 that's been quoted around, and it's shocking. And it's spread it in such a speed that, yeah, if countries like Japan continue to ignore it, it will come, and it will come in the form of radicalization. And that's the problem. They know how to tap into people's guilt, how to give people belonging. It becomes very lucrative. And for a lot of people, I think it's because the media portrays it in a particular way. The
Mm,
media is complicit in the growth of the radicals because they're romanticizing it. And for a lot
yeah.
of people, I think that romantic angle is the reason why they're becoming radicalized. And I know it sounds bizarre. It's kind of like, well, once you awake to it and you see it, you can't unsee it. But a lot of people just cannot see it. Even in the aftermath of Bondi, I've had people which are not anti-Semites at all,
Mm,
just get the didn't get the fact that Bondi massacre is not Port Arthur, which we had the last mass shooting event. They've
mm,
targeted a particular minority group in a particular minority group festival. It's very targeted. It's not a mass shooting event. And when you classify it as a mass shooting event, you take away from what it really was. But
mm,
also, I think a lot of people for a very long time looked at the security around Jewish institution as an
mm,
overreaction, as a almost like drama queens, those Jews, they
mm,
like to do things. But for us, it was a very harsh reality because we've been the Jew hunting season has been going around for a very long time,
yeah,
much
it's
longer than I existed, and it's our history. It's our reality, and we live in it. It's something that we've got to deal with. It's unfortunate, but I don't. A lot of people, I think, after October 7, after Bondi here in Australia, they're really taking it hard. And I know it sounds bad, but I'm desensitized to it in a way of survival. It's the way to cope with the fact that I might go out and never come back because of who I am. Unlike some of I've had quite a few people telling me that I can convert if I don't like the threats on me, which is just
That's
gobsmacked.
weird. Okay.
It's weird.
Freedom of religion is
Yeah,
supposed to, has to
yeah. But it's just bizarre. But anyway, it's what we have to deal with. That's our life, and most of the people in the world don't live good life. So I just go, okay, so we as well. So what? Well, what can we do? See the sky, wake up to another good day, and that's I think what we descend. I'm more apathic to it, and it's unfortunately something that happened along the second Intifada in Israel. We became too much grief turned us into people who are even with October 7. I think once October 7 finished, when the living hostages came back, I felt like I could start processing it a little bit. But you move on very quickly because
Yeah.
we have to. Otherwise, otherwise we won't be able to leave. I think for a lot of people, unfortunately, Bondi should be a wake-up call.
Mm.
But for them, I think it's just another chapter in the bloody Middle East. They don't say that it's beyond the Middle East. It's always been beyond the Middle East. The Middle
Yeah.
East is a battleground, not ground zero. It's
Mhm.
just a battleground. And if the world won't wake up, there's going to be a very different world in the decades and centuries to come, which is unfortunate because we're on the cusp of great achievements. We progressed quite a lot. Most of the modern world, people have got complete equal rights and equal opportunities and live long life and enjoy life. And we've had so much progress in the last 100 years. And it would be a shame to see it all go away because of banging the head in the sand to a political ideology from 1300 years ago that's hell-bent on taking us back to that time.
Thank you so much. But, I hope that, people, the victims of Bondi Beach, recovers, and also I pray that, the victims' families, have a lot of support from people, who, because there are people like who are posting about GoFundMe information and so forth. And so I really hope that, they could get support from their communities, not just communities, but, globally and, in good ways. And,
Yeah.
I really believe that there is goodness in ourselves. So, I hope that, there is, the society moves towards the good, trend really, and towards makes a good turn really. And I hope there is a good turn in Japan too. So
Yeah, I hope. As I said, I'm a realistic and very cynical, but internal optimistic in regards to the only way to move forward is to hope that it's going to be better. So what I'm hoping that out of all of this sorrow, out of all of the tragedies that happen, that something good will come out of it. The people will wake up, that will come back to understanding that the Western modern world that was created after World War II is something really unique in this history of humankind. We need to fight for it. We need to preserve it, and we need to improve it, but we shouldn't kill it. That's for sure. So I'm this is a finishing on a positive note. I really hope that that's going to be the outcome from it. That we're going to see good awakening. That people will realize what's worth fighting for, and what a shame it would be for this to be like the end of the Roman Empire, where it just disintegrated from within and radicals from outside took over and pushed us into the dark ages for millennia. So I'm really hoping that that's the that the tragedies that we see over the last few years are going to be the things that will drive a good change.
yeah. But anyway, thank you very much for your time,
Yeah,
and I hope that maybe you come back sometime in the near future to talk about, the
always happy.
Zennism.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
always happy. Whenever I really enjoy it, and yeah, hopefully also we can meet in person.
Okay,
Some,
sure. Why not?
yeah.
Yes, sure. So have a nice day. It's
Thank you very
summertime
much.
in Australia.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See you, Anna.
Thank you.
Artlist.io.
Good tidings we bring to you and your kin. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. and a
Music
Happy
licensing
New Year.
reimagined.
Good tidings we bring to you and your kin. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Now bring us some figgy pudding. Now bring us some figgy pudding. Now bring us some
Artlist.io.
figgy pudding and a cup of good cheer. We won't go until we get some. We won't go until we get some. We won't go until we get some. So bring it right here.
Music licensing reimagined. Artlist.io.